So this project has been supported by senior fellowship, MAIRCOM, which is devoted to the design of frequency combs in the mid-infrared for dual-comb spectroscopy. Just a few words about what is a laser. John Dudley yesterday has explained in more details. So it's a device providing an extremely directional light beam of high spectral purity, almost monochromatic, by amplifying light by stimulating emission of radiation. If you look at the spectrum of a continuous wave laser, so we can see it's composed of a single frequency. So this field is very active because there are 16 Nobel Prizes in this field, as John Dudley said yesterday. The two last in 2018 by Donna Strickland and Gerard Mourou. There are many applications of lasers, so I will not go into details. That's completely impossible. So what's a frequency comb now? So a frequency comb is simply the spectrum generated by a laser emitting a periodic train of pulses. So if you take the Fourier transform of a train of pulses, so you obtain a discrete spectrum composed of many lines which are separated by a constant interval, which is equal to the frequency repetitions of the pulse train. And if you consider the envelope of the spectrum, it's simply the Fourier transform of a single pulse. So a frequency comb is a light source equivalent to several million continuous lasers emitting in unisons. Frequency combs have revolutionized precise measurements of time and frequency and are at the origin of numerous applications. So we can cite GPS, optical metrology, new atomic clocks, spectroscopy, and so on. So just now a few words about laser spectroscopy techniques. So there are many different techniques. And absorption laser spectroscopy is an efficient tool to probe matter with precision to derive information such as the structure of molecules, temperature, and nature and concentration of the components, molecular interaction, and so on. So there are different configurations of laser spectroscopy. So the simplest is very efficient. It uses a tunable continuous laser, and so it's composed of single frequencies that you can move. Okay, and the spectrum is directly measured by detecting the light intensity transmitted by the medium as a function of the frequency of the tunable laser. So it's a nice system. It does not use a spectrometer, but the acquisition speed is relatively low because it is limited by the speed of the tuning of tuning the frequency of the continuous laser. Another technique is based on frequency combs. So as you can see, so you have all the frequencies at the same time. So you don't need to tune the laser, but you need a spectrometer to resolve the spectrum. So it's very, very nice, very wise technique, but the spectral resolution is limited by the resolution of the spectrometer. So maybe the most used technique of spectroscopy is certainly the Fourier transform spectroscopy, which is based on the use of a Michelson interferometer with a movable mirror, as you can see here. And you have interference between the two arms of the interferometer, and you measure an interferogram, and then you take the Fourier transform to get the spectrum. Okay, so it's a very efficient technique, but the drawback is that we have a movable mirror, which is a mechanical system. So the speed of spectrum acquisition is relatively low. Okay. So to overcome this drawback, a new technique of spectroscopy has been proposed. It is based on a frequency comb, on two frequency combs. It's similar to Fourier transform spectroscopy, but without a spectrometer. So the technique uses two frequency combs with slightly different repetition frequencies. And the superposition of the two combs will give interference or beats in the radio frequency domain. And it's easy to detect the radio frequency spectrum because you can do that with a standard detector. If the two combs, if one or the two combs propagate through a gas sample, for example, so the absorption of the medium can be directly detected by the radio frequency spectrum. So it's a very efficient technique. And it is based on down frequency conversion, as you can see, from the optical to the radio frequency domain. It's really equivalent to a reduction gear, the same principle. So what's the advantages of dual-comb spectroscopy? So the measurement of a spectrum can be very fast, precise, and we can have high resolutions on broad spectral range. But the drawback is that we have to resolve the radio frequency spectrum. So that means that the bit not line width should be smaller than the distance between two comb lines, of course. That means that the bit not line width should be less than the detuning between the repetition frequencies of the two combs. So that means that we should have a high frequency stability of both combs. And so we need to synchronize the frequency combs with high precision, and this can be done just by a few labs in the world. It's a very complex and technical system, which limits the use of this technique. So to overcome this problem, we propose in Dijon an alternative method, which is simpler to implement. It is based on the use of a single frequency laser, a single continuous wave laser, and we generate the two combs from the same laser. Okay? This laser is split into two parts, and each part is intensity modulated just to generate a train of pulses. We slice the continuous laser with these electro-optic modulators. And these modulators, the two modulators, are set at slightly different frequencies. So we can have a difference of repetition of frequencies between the two combs. So it's very simple. And the two combs are mutually coherent because they are generated from the same laser. So there is no need to synchronize them. So it's it's a huge simplification of the technique. The problem is that with these electro-optic modulators, we cannot generate very short pulses. It's limited to a few picoseconds, typically 50 picoseconds. It's due to the bandwidth of the electro-optic modulators. So we need to broaden the electro-optic combs to consider applications. So for that, we use our know-how on nonlinear propagation of pulses in optical fibers. And more specially, we will use a physical process of shock waves in a special fiber whose parameters have been determined from numerical simulations of the nonlinear Schrödinger equations, which governs the propagation of pulses in optical fibers. Here you can see an example of simulations. So we can see we can get a very flat spectrum, very flat comb, and we will see experimentally after that we can get a few nanometers spectral width. This is the experimental results. So we can see that the comb broadens as a function of the propagation distance, and we can get a flat spectrum of 6 nanometers, which is composed of 2,700 individual lines, which are not shown here because they are not resolved by the optical spectrum analyzers that we use. This is an example of a radio frequency comb just before absorption. So here you cannot see the comb lines because there are too many. But if you zoom on the radio frequency comb, so you can see that the comb lines are clearly resolved. And if you look at the width of a comb line, we have a very small width of a few hertz, 4 hertz, in the radio frequency domains, which correspond in the optical domain to 13 kilohertz. So it's very small width for a dual-comb system without phase lock electronics. It's at least 1 order or 2 orders of magnitude better than the previous results obtained by in the group of Hensch in Munich. So to sum up at this point, so the advantage of our electro-optic dual-comb spectroscopy is that there is no active stabilization of the two combs. So it's really a simplification and democratization of the technique. The system is highly stable because it uses all fiber components. Okay. And the spectral resolution can be electronically adjusted because there is no resonant cavity. The measurements can be fast in the domain of a few microseconds to milliseconds, and we have high sensitivity. After the first results, so I propose a collaboration to Theodor Hensch, who is the expert of frequency combs, and we published together a seminal paper. This is a photo of our spectrometer in the lab. So it's really typical to all fiber systems. It looks more electronics than optics. Everything is, almost everything is fiber. So now I will show you a few results. First, in the near infrared, so at telecommunication wavelengths, 1.55, 57 microns. This is the example of carbon dioxide. Here we have a mixture of 10% of 13 CO2 and 90% of 12 CO2. You can see the interferogram, which is recorded, and then we take the Fourier transform, and we get directly the spectrum in the radio frequency domain, and then we multiply by the constants that we have to get the spectrum in the optical domain. The absorption of CO2 at this wavelength is very small. So we need to increase the absorption length. So for that, we use a hollow core fiber, and we put the gas into the core of the fiber. Here we use almost 50 meters long fiber. So you can see the spectrum, it looks nice. And we did similar experiments at around 2 microns, because the components, the telecom components exist also at 2 microns, so we can reproduce exactly the same spectrometer at this wavelength. But here the advantage is that CO2, the absorption of CO2 is higher, is stronger at this wavelength, so we just need 78 centimeters long cell. So. And you can see here, this is the experimental spectrum. So you cannot see the comb lines. Just for clarity, we just put the maxima of each comb line. Okay? And we have a mirror representation of a calculated spectrum, which is calculated from the database ITRAN. Okay? And you can see a good agreement. Here, this is a calculated spectrum just from this ITRAN database, and just for a few gases, few molecules, from 1 to 5 microns. And you can see, of course, that the absorption is stronger in the mid-infrared. For example, if you take the example of CO2 in blue here, the absorption of CO2 at around 4 microns is 1,000 times higher than the absorption at 2 microns, and 100,000 higher than at telecommunication wavelengths. So it's really relevant to extend our spectrometer in the mid-infrared, of course, to get higher detection sensitivity. So for that, again, we use our know-how in nonlinear propagations of pulses in optical fibers. More precisely, we have used a different process for the frequency conversion of the combs from the near-infrared to the mid-infrared. We have used fourth-order modulation instability in highly nonlinear optical fibers or in integrated waveguides. And we have used another process, which is a difference frequency generation in nonlinear PPLN waveguide. It's a pity I don't have time to explain in detail each process. but we master these to get nice results. For this conversion, we need a optical power supply. Okay, so for that we use a continuous wave laser, which is tunable in frequency. And with this tunability in frequency, so we can get from 2 to 5 microns. So we can explore a large part of the mid-infrared domain. So this is an example at 2 microns. So we use for that an optical fiber to convert the comms from the near-infrared to the mid-infrared. And what is important in this experiment is that we use exactly the same laser to convert the 2 comms, and we use the same optical fiber also to convert the 2 comms. This is very important to preserve the mutual coherence between the 2 comms. And here we use counter-propagating configurations, so we can see that exactly the same fiber is used for these frequency conversions. So you can see an example of the spectrum of a mixture of CO2 and oxygen around 2 microns. And the spectrum covers a spectral range of about 3 terahertz, which correspond to 37 nanometers. And again, you can see that we have very good agreement between the experimental data and the superposition of Lorentzian profiles, which was fitted to the experimental spectrum. And if you look at the residuals, we have a standard deviations of 1% only, and without any systematic deviations. And you can see we have a good signal-to-noise ratio, so we can see very small lines. Here, now I will show you some examples of frequency conversions, but obtained in that case by difference frequency generation in a nonlinear crystal. This is the example of ethylene, around 3.35 microns, and at low pressure, here, almost 1 millibar. Okay. So that means we are in the Doppler regime, and we have very narrow lines. And we can see that with our spectrometer, we can resolve the lines perfectly. Again, we have a good agreement with the theoretical spectrum. Another example, in the case of 13 CO2 in natural abundance, around 4.47 microns. Okay. And you can see an example of the spectrum. And here we have used the experimental data to determine the pressure. We could also determine the temperature. So we have fit the pressure from this experimental data, and we obtain a pressure of almost 400 millibar, which is exactly, which is in very good agreement with the expected value. So that means with our spectrometer, we can determine the pressure or the temperature that can be very useful to analyze combustions, for example. So now I will show 2 applications. The first is for the analysis of the exhaled breath, and the second for detection of pollutants. So we know that there are several thousand volatile organic compounds, VOC, which have been identified in human breath. And the detection of these VOC can be used for early detection, for early identifications of certain diseases like cancer, lung diseases, diabetes, Parkinson, and so on. And one solution also is to measure the isotopic ratio between carbon-13 and carbon-12 in CO2, for example, because we know that certain diseases increase this ratio. This is the case, for example, of the Helicobacter pylori bacteria, which can be present in the stomach. And the presence of these bacteria increase the isotopic ratio. So if we are able to measure this ratio with precision, we will be able to detect some problem. So in natural abundance, CO2, we have about 1% of carbon-13 and against 99% of carbon-12 in CO2. So we have to choose a spectral region where the intensities of the CO2, the 12 CO2 lines, are very low compared to the intensities of carbon-13, just to compensate the difference of concentration. This is exactly the case around this spectral domain at 4.36 microns. So we did experiments at this wavelengths. This is an example of experimental spectra recorded in a short time, 20 milliseconds. So the signal-to-noise ratio is not very high, but it's due to the fact that it's a short time record. And we have to be aware that we have 1% of carbon-13 in a few percent of CO2. In the exhaled air, the concentration of carbon dioxide is about 4 or 5%. So we detect 1% of a few percent. So, okay, in very short time. But, however, the agreement with calculations is relatively good. So it's possible to determine the partial pressure of CO2 in exhaled air. And we obtain, in this example, 39 millimeter of mercury. This is in good agreement with the expected value of 37 millimeter of mercury for a healthy person. This measurement of partial pressure of CO2 is repeated periodically in order to record a capnogram, which is the representation of the partial pressure of CO2 versus time. Here you can see two breathing cycles of the experimentalist. So I will not give the name of the experimentalist because it's really personal. But we can detect, we can measure two parameters. There are two important parameters: the angle alpha here, and the end tidal CO2, which are both, these parameters are both relevant for medical perspectives. And we measure head tidal CO2 of 37 millimeter of mercury, which is exactly the expected value for a healthy person. And the measure angles are 110 degrees and 107 degrees, which are in very good agreement with the expected value of 106 degrees. We have also measured the isotopic ratio of carbon-13 over carbon-12 in the exhaled air. This is an example of experimental results. And the fit of a theoretical spectral profile to the experimental spectrum allows us to determine the isotopic ratio. So we obtain 1.03% with a precision of about 1% on this value, which disagree a little bit with the expected value. But this is a very preliminary result. We are confident to improve these results. But in any case, the measurement accuracy is very promising because it's 1%, and just some improvement is needed to consider clinical use. For example, we have to improve the precision by a factor of 2-3, so we are confident. The last example is the case of automotive exhaust gas analysis. So we took an example at the exhaust pipe of a car with a bag, and we put the bag in the experiment. And don't worry, we did not put the car into the lab directly. And we measure the concentration of carbon monoxide, and we obtain a value of 9 for the partial pressure. We obtain a value of 9.3 millibar, which corresponds to 1% in good agreement with the typical emissions of a gasoline car. So to conclude, we have developed a new type of spectrometer operating in the near and mid-infrared with unique characteristics in terms of spectral resolution, wavelength tunability, and acquisition speed. We have given some proofs of concept for the analysis of exhaled air and the detection of pollutants. And now we are currently developing a mobile prototype of the dual-comb spectrometer with the support of the SAT Science. This is the SpectroComb project. So the MyComb project has contributed to convert the spectrometer for the near-infrared to the mid-infrared, so that now we can consider industrial development. And this MyComb project also contributed to consolidate excellence in fundamental research through the submission of NERC Synergy project on rogue waves, and we are waiting for the results. It should arrive soon. I would like to thank two close collaborators, Kamal Amani, and especially Alexandre Pariot, PhD, and now engineer from the SAT Science. And I invite you to attend the optics conference in Dijon. Will take place here in July, if there is no problem. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for your very interesting talk, and it illustrates the fact that a research project can have some perspective in both application and also fundamental science. So, is there any question? We are going to take a few time for question. Yeah.
We could ask if this research has some interdisciplinary aspect, which I think it does. There is the history of the development of the nonlinear optics in collaboration mainly with Michel Remoissenet at the time where he was in a different lab. So I'll let Guy maybe make a comment on that. I think that your system works because you were able to combine your early experience in spectroscopy with nonlinear physics that was brought by Michel Remoissenet and his team.
Okay, yes, that's true. So at the beginning of my career, so as somebody knows, so I perform spectroscopic studies, high-resolution spectroscopy, both theoretically and experimentally, especially with Raman spectroscopy. So I acquire some knowledge on this field, and after a few years, so I switch into another field. This is the field of non-linear propagation of pulses, and especially the field of solitons, which have been initiated by Michel Remoissenet, that's true, and so he's not here now, unfortunately, and he has really contributed a lot to this conversion of field. And if we have these results now, it's really due to this combination of spectroscopy and nonlinear optics in optical fibers. So that means that pluridisciplinary research is very important. You can do by yourself, but it's also sometimes easier to do with collaborators, of course. Okay.
Yeah, just no.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy, for the very nice talk. I had just a question about the way you maybe classify or analyze the output spectra that you get. Would it be interesting to involve machine learning to have an automatic detection? Have you tried this already? And what about this part of the analysis, the identification of the output time trace or frequency trace?
At the moment, so it's not really useful to use these kind of things like machine learning, because we are at the beginning of these experiments. So the most important is to give proof of concepts. So for that, we decide to use certain gases, okay, which are important for combustion, for medical applications, and so on. So there is no need for improving the system, the spectrometer. So there is no need of this machine learning and so on, because we are at the beginning, so we have to.
Olivier?
Thank you for this nice talk, Guy. I was wondering about these volatile compounds. So with your spectrums, would you be able to blind identify specific compounds for a given disease with your approach, or would that rely mostly on databases and analysis of spectrum? So, this is a very naive question, but in other words, could you use this technique just to have a blind analysis of different diseases and maybe sort out what kind of volatile compound may be of interest and maybe followed to detect the disease?
Okay, so it's a very important question, of course. And at this moment, okay, as I showed for the case of the isotopic ratio of carbon-13 over carbon-12, so we don't have enough precision at the moment. We should improve our systems by a factor of 2 or 3. So we are really confident that we can do that. And so we are confident to be able to make a clinical use of these experiments to detect bacteria in the stomach and for other diseases. So we don't have a precise contact with people at the hospital for the moment. We just have a call, but that was really a preliminary contact. So I think that we can use this technique. There are other techniques which are efficient. So we have to prove that our technique will give some add value, and in particular for the speed of detection. So the particularity of our spectrometer is the speed of detection. We can detect a spectrum in just a few microseconds or milliseconds. That depends on the signal-to-noise ratio that you need. Okay, so if there is application which need really fast recordment, so it will be really useful. But that depends on the application, so I cannot go into details. We have not explored this in details at the moment. We focus on the device. Okay. Well, maybe I could add something. So our system will be relatively expensive, okay, of the order of 200,000 euros. So it should be, we should be aware about that. Okay, so to be really useful, it should be really performant with respect to simpler techniques. Okay.
As yesterday for John, I will ask a non-scientific question regarding Institut Universitaire de France. So you have a big experience in Institut Universitaire de France. So do you have any advice to future applicants or to promote application of researcher from UBFC to EUF? And before answering, I will ask to the next speaker to come here.
Okay, so I succeed, so that proves that it's possible. Okay, and what kind of recommendation? So if you are relatively young, so you can apply for junior positions. So it's maybe easier to get this position. And one recommendation so is to develop multidisciplinary research. It's very it's a very good thing, okay? And okay, you have to have a good CV, of course, a good track record, and nice project. But don't hesitate, I would say, like John, don't hesitate to apply. If you like to apply, you can contact me. I can give some precise advices according to your precise profile.
So let's thank you again.
Thank you.